Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. My name is Dave Brown, and when these events happened, I was a 42-year-old contract engineering consultant who ran a very stable business from my home. My wife, Maria, was 44 years old and worked as a paralegal at her brother's law firm, not far from our home in a semi-rural area of Prater County, Texas. We had 2 children, 20-year-old twins, Andrew and Andrea, known as Drew and Andy, who studied at my alma mater about 2 hours away. Unlike most stories, I'm not a former Navy SEAL, and Maria wasn't one of those women who kept her supermodel appearance despite having 2 children. I stay in good shape by running a mile a day and eating well, but mostly my genetics keep me healthy and in reasonable shape. When these events occurred, I was 6 feet 1 inch tall, weighing 188 pounds, with a little gray in my dark brown hair. Maria was 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed about 150 pounds, about 20 pounds heavier than when we got married. While Maria was a bit overweight, I loved her curvy, sensual curves as much as she hated them. There was no gray in her jet black hair, and it shone almost blue in the sun. Her dark brown eyes were piercing and intense and could pierce me like a hot knife through butter, both in good times and now when we had problems. Even after we were married for 21 years, our life was pretty good, but it was reduced to once or twice a week for a month or so before everything went awry. When the twins were in the 3rd grade, Maria's brother Robert hired her part-time at his law office. We agreed that she would become a paralegal, and I was happy to sacrifice myself and do whatever was necessary to help her get a certificate. In the end, I reasoned that Maria had dropped out of college before that and helped me get an engineering degree and raise our young children. It was then that I started my own business and started my own home consulting business, which was successful from the very beginning. Now it was my turn to give her the opportunity to advance. Life was idyllic. Many nights we sat on the long covered porch of this old house and planned our future. It was there on quiet evenings that we forged our hopes, dreams, and goals. It was here that we turned them into reality on a solid anvil of love, trust, and understanding. Maria and I planted a vegetable garden together, grew flowers, and loved to cook. We also continued to work on this old house. Most of the efforts were focused on routine and preventive maintenance. We had so much in common that it was natural to feel safe and comfortable. Existence on the outskirts of the countryside was good, and life was comfortable and predictable. There were ups and downs, minor misunderstandings, and all those other conflicts that happen in a marriage. We were always able to talk them through, and we had a great family support network that we could turn to when we needed it. But most importantly, we had that perfect, all-binding glue called love. Maria began to change in late autumn and winter after the twins left home for university. She became quieter, more withdrawn, and when I asked her, she disparagingly attributed her mood to the absence of children. Since I worked from home, their absence seemed to hit me harder, because since Maria returned to work, it was I who took care of their morning and after-school needs. When I had to go to work, Maria adjusted her schedule or called someone from my family or neighbors to help. Anyway, I wasn't going to get into a competition over which of us missed the kids the most, but it seemed like I was just handling it better. As the dark, dreary winter days loomed over us, Maria became more distant and even angry. She began to find fault with the little things. There was no point or reason in her outbursts. After a particularly unpleasant quarrel, I angrily confronted her, and Maria stormed out of the house and returned well after midnight. After that incident, I asked Robert, her brother and boss, to talk to her. He and their mother Beatrice had something of a discussion at the end of the day, and as a result, Maria told them to get out of her life, and surprisingly, she quit her job. The following days were terrible. Beatrice tried to persuade my wife to see her gynecologist or family doctor, as she suspected that my wife had problems with hormones. This seemed to anger Maria even more, and after that, we all turned out to be guilty. In Maria's opinion, life was terrible. She was bored, and her family, with the exception of Drew and Andy, was part of her problem. Christmas and New Year were stressful, and the children were just as anxious as the rest of us, but they tried not to take sides. When either or both of them were alone with their mother, Drew and Andy said she was stressed, but Maria was the mother they had always known in all other ways. Andy tried to talk to her mother about the atmosphere between her and me, and Maria told her it was none of her business. Just after Christmas, Maria came out of the house one morning in full working attire, and when I asked her where she was going, she just looked at me and said, outside. Andy followed her into the garage and started asking her mother about what she was doing, but she was told, "I'm doing something for myself." Later that day, I learned from Andy that her mother had gone for an interview at another law firm, and they immediately hired her as a paralegal and personal assistant to one of the partners. When I asked her, she just nodded and said, "Now I don't work anywhere just because I'm a family member." "Maria, I don't think Robert hired you for that reason. You've done your job well, darling," I said softly. I was surprised when she kissed me warmly on the lips. "Thanks, Dave. It was after Christmas Mass. Oh, we're invited to the law firm's New Year's Eve party. It's going to be a bit of an introduction for me." I didn't mention her family's New Year's Eve party, which is an annual tradition for us. Instead, I decided to put up with it and see where it leads. After all, I reasoned, Maria and I had been polite ever since she unilaterally declared a Christmas truce. When we appeared in a small banquet hall at the New Year's Eve party of the law firm Baker, Long and Flanagan, the office manager, a woman named Peggy Leeson, introduced Maria and me to those present. It was a template event with a rented place, service, an open bar, and a passable DJ. At dinner, we were sitting with 3 other couples, and I immediately noticed that everyone was drinking a lot. Like at New Year's Eve parties, this one was pretty typical. Maria seemed to be the same, and we communicated quite well with other couples and some singles. I met all 3 partners, and they seemed like pretty nice guys to me. There were no violations on anyone's part that I could detect, so this party was not part of the general scheme of future events. For me, it just served to combine a name and a face, which I will see quite soon in completely different conditions. Unlike Maria's 2-day Christmas truce, this period of domestic tranquility lasted until I switched the car to drive mode, leaving the party venue. I put my hand on my wife's leg and she roughly pushed her away. "Maybe if you hadn't been hovering over me all evening, I'd be in the mood." "Damn it, you've been like a chaperone to me, Dave." I didn't know any of these people. What did you expect from me? With a stern look, she replied, "I don't know. You're an adult now. Maybe you should have gone to Mom's party and let me meet these people on my own." "Really, honey? Go to your family's New Year's Eve party without you?" She shrugged her shoulders and looked sullenly out the window, indicating that the conversation was over. Even though she started her new job on the 2nd, Maria continued to be sullen. Andy tried to persuade Maria to see a doctor about her mood and got whipped just as hard as everyone else. Robert told me that Beatrice met Maria for lunch the following Friday and left in tears. As an indication of how bad things were at the Browns' house in early January, Drew and Andy returned to school 3 days early. Towards the end of January, I carried out the usual checks of the water heater in the basement, the central heating, and generally checked everything in general. This included searching for water leaks and checking plumbing and wiring. I saw the light from the kitchen door and noticed Maria standing in the doorway at the top of the basement stairs. With her arms crossed over her chest and a stern expression on her face, she seemed determined to start another of the frequent quarrels we've had lately. "Dave, we need to talk," she snapped. Before I could answer, she turned away towards the living room. When I entered, Maria was sitting on one of the large, comfortable armchairs that faced the L-shaped sofa and a sofa for 2. "Sit down. I have to tell you something," she said coldly. She was still in her office outfit. One part of me was worried because there was something unusual in her eyes. Another part of me was preparing for another endless, complaining, angry shit. No part of me was ready for the shit that was falling from the stratosphere into my punch bowl. "Darling, I know of no other way to tell you this, but I'm fed up with the way my life is going. I am unhappy and unhappy. Life is boring and the world is passing me by. There is no passion, no excitement, and you, Dave, are the main part of how I feel." "What? Honey, you—" "Hush, Dave. I have to tell you this, damn it," she shouted. "See, you won't even let me tell you how I feel." As I said, I'm tired of my life, so I'm changing it. I got along with my new boss, and we've been dating for about 2 weeks now. There's chemistry between us, and we can't hide it anymore. Brent's picking me up here in an hour for a date, and I might not be home until tomorrow or maybe even Sunday. I was so angry that the words were pouring out of me. "What? The hell you will," I shouted. "What makes you think I'm going to put up with this shit? Are you crazy, Maria? Dave, be reasonable. I haven't been happy for months. Maybe it's just a problem of adapting to life without children, but I need it for my sanity. Let me get this out of my head. I love you, darling, and I want to spend my whole life with you. This Brent thing is just physical, baby." "Damn it, Maria. Why do you think I'll agree to this? Have you forgotten our wedding vows? She looked at me like I was crazy. I love you, Maria, and I will not put up with your infidelity. Maria laughed. Oh, Dave, that's your ego talking. Baby, I love you, but right now I need to change the pace. It's just making love, and it means nothing to me except having a little fun before I get too old to enjoy it. I suddenly stood up and Maria said, Stop it. Don't you dare come any closer to me. What? I asked in confusion. I'm damn angry, Maria. I mean, do you want me to agree to let you use someone else? This is not going to happen. Dave, I'm serious. I don't like the way you're standing there. Get off, she hissed. Puzzled by her behavior, I walked away and sat down on the steps. Look, if you get through this shit, we're done. We're done. Instead of ruining our marriage, let's go to a marriage counselor or take a vacation. You are welcome. It's not about us, Dave. It's about me and my happiness. I love you more than you can imagine. But right now I need a break from you. From us. Darling, I love you more than life, and that's why I can't stand by and let you do this. Our marriage is at stake, and I won't share you with anyone. I've never cheated on you, and I can't stand by and let you cheat. It's not about love. I know what I'm doing. Now get away from that ladder. You can't keep me out of my own bedroom, Maria said in a cold and formal tone. As she passed me, she said, Don't raise your hand like you're going to hit me. Surprised, I raised my voice. Maria, I'm not... She interrupted me. Get back, Dave, I'm warning you. She quickly disappeared upstairs into our bedroom. What the hell just happened? I said it loud enough for her to hear me. I would never lay a hand on you, and you know it. I had been sitting on the stairs for at least 20 minutes, trying to gather my thoughts on what I needed to do, when Maria, stunningly dressed, galloped past me. Her clothes perfectly emphasized her strong, slender legs and seductively hugged her curvy figure. She carried a small travel bag in her hand. Anxiously, I prayed, Please, Maria, I beg you not to do this. You are welcome. Around this time, the doorbell rang, and she looked at me with a cold smile with cold, heartless eyes. Maria opened the door, and a tall man in a coat and an expensive suit stood in the doorway. He was at least 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed about 220 pounds, with reddish blonde hair and blue eyes. I assumed he was between 30 and 40 years old. As if I wasn't there, he bent down and kissed my wife warmly. Hi, baby, he said. You look good enough to eat. They both laughed. Hey, you bastard! This is my wife! Get out of my house or I'll throw you out! I shouted. Fuming, I went over and grabbed my wife's wrist. Let me go, Dave. She twisted out of my grip and the man stepped between us. Leave her alone, Dave, he warned with a grin. You insolent bastard, I spat. He turned to Maria and asked calmly, Has he been like this for a long time? Yes, that's right, Brent, since I told him about us, Maria said seriously. I know you only met Dave at a party, but he's not usually like that. It dawned on me that it was Maria's new boss, Brent Flanagan. He was one of the partners in the law firm where she worked. When I saw the look that these two exchanged, I felt like a bird that had built its nest in the mouth of a cannon. Serious shit was coming, and I had no idea how much or where from. Turning to me, Brent said, Maria is coming with me, and you can't stop her. You have no legal right to detain her or detain her as you just tried. Of course, you can sue her for divorce. That's your legal right. Keep in mind, along the way, my law firm will happily bankrupt you with legal fees. Right now, your loving wife, who is also my dear friend and valued colleague, needs a break from the unhappy, boring, and stressful routine of her marriage. To be honest, I think so too, so we'll take this break together. They exchanged warm smiles. Flanagan continued. So, while this is going on between Maria and me, you need to calm down and remain the hard-working, kind, and loving husband that Maria so often brags about. And don't think for a minute that Maria or I want to ruin our marriages. It's just a physical animal attraction. They both laughed. Don't worry, Dave, it won't be every night. And as far as I know, Maria, she'll still be looking out for you. He turned to my wife. Won't she, darling? Maria giggled and looked at Brent playfully. Of course it is, Brent. And I tried to explain to him that it's just CX. What I have with my husband is true love, she smiled at me. Isn't that right, Dave? You have a shitty way of showing it, I replied angrily. Brent turned to me with a grin and said firmly, Now, Dave, calm down and don't do anything stupid that you'll regret. I will deliver her home tomorrow afternoon or Sunday at the latest, in the same condition as she is now. Well, almost the same thing. They both laughed. He helped her put on an expensive suede coat that I gave her for Christmas. Hand in hand, they walked down the steps together and out of the lighted entrance. I went outside and stood there dazed, feeling sick and trembling. Anger, jealousy, pain, and fear bubbled up inside me. I heard a powerful engine come to life, and some European sports car flew out of the blind spot behind a high hedge in the corner of the yard. I called Robert and told him what had happened. He said, "Don't do anything, Dave. I'll be there in half an hour." When my brother-in-law arrived, I was sitting on the porch, dressed only in jeans, boots, and a long-sleeved flannel shirt. "Come on, Dave. Let's get you inside," Robert said, helping me up. After pouring me a strong double bourbon, Robert asked me to describe everything in as much detail as I could remember, and he recorded it on a small digital recorder. Because of the shocking nature of all this, I could tell the events in detail. What was most puzzling was Maria's overreaction whenever I was angry. I remembered that Flanagan had reacted the same way. Robert confirmed that neither I nor any other man have the legal right to forbid his wife to leave the family home on a date. Moreover, although this house was my only legitimate property, Maria had the right to return until she was legally evicted from the house. "So what about when I grabbed her wrist to try to hold her down?" I asked, fearing an answer. Robert shook his head. "You have no right. This could be interpreted as domestic violence, especially with a witness like Flanagan. Look, it was just a reaction, and she twisted right out of my grip." Robert nodded sympathetically. "What's done is done. According to the law, she can be charged with assault or even domestic violence." Damn it, I can't believe it. It was as if my heart was bursting out of my chest, and I felt tears welling up again. "What can I do, Robert?" "Legally, all you can do is divorce her. Texas still allows applications based on adultery, which often affects the division of property and spousal support. Of course, the court can order a consultation, which would allow her to be brought to a mental health specialist. Heck, Mom can't even get her to make an appointment with a doctor to check her hormones." I wiped my eyes with flannel sleeves. Dude, I love her. I can't give a damn about all these years, and she's using it against me. Maybe it's depression or hormones or a combination of them. I would wait a few days and see if she realizes how much she screwed up. "I don't know. You haven't seen her. It was like she was possessed. The look she gave me when she opened the door was angry. Then her attitude, the way she kissed him in front of me. They did it as if they were thirsting for blood. Damn it, she could have said, 'I'm leaving to use my boss and sleep with him,' and gone to his house. But he came to my front door like it was a high school date. My pulse was pounding in my ears. Well, look who he is, Dave. His old man is B. Elton Flanagan. This bastard thinks he can do anything and get away with it, and he's probably right," Robert explained. "I can't even imagine, Dave. But the woman who's doing this isn't my little sister, man, and you know it." Then he asked, when Flanagan mentioned his marriage, was that all he said? That he also took a break? We talked about it for a long time, and in the end I chose the option to hope for the best, which is quite a pity. But at that moment, what did I know? Maybe Maria was mentally ill. Maybe she was just angry. At the moment, I was playing a waiting game. Looking back, I think both Robert and I believed that eventually the real Maria Brown would appear, and we would be able to solve all our problems. After Robert left, I lay down on the futon, but in my imagination I saw her beautiful legs wrapped around an excited, sweaty Flanagan. I could imagine him punching my beautiful wife and then looking at me with a smirk. After taking Benadryl at 2 a.m., I fell into a restless sleep. Maria's mom called me around 10 o'clock and said she had been trying to contact her daughter since last night. "Dave, we know it's not really Maria. I'll bring her back to reality, and she'll be a good wife to you again," she said, her voice anxious and full of tension. After all, I was the only one who comforted Beatrice. I needed to do something, so I started researching Brent Flanagan. I confirmed that he was the namesake of B. Elton Flanagan, and was probably trying to follow in the old man's footsteps. After searching the internet, I also found out that Brent Flanagan is married to Tanya Barrett Flanagan. She was in the same damn boat as me. What I couldn't find was her phone number. Unable to sleep, I decided to check the water heater on the lower floor again, where I noticed some corrosion of the pipes. I've shut off the gas supply through the ball valve, and I'll be doing repairs next week. Working on some of my consulting projects also occupied my thoughts, and before I realized it, it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning again. I slept fitfully for about 4 hours, and once again had almost nothing for breakfast. When I heard the key turn in the front door, it was 12:33 Sunday afternoon. Maria came in wearing jeans, a designer pullover, sneakers, and a suede coat. She was wearing almost no makeup, and her hair was pulled back into a tight chignon. Without saying a word, she walked past me and went straight upstairs to our bedroom. Was I stunned? To be honest, yes. Mostly I was not satisfied with how audaciously, almost arrogantly, Maria returned home. Was I surprised? No, because nothing my wife has done will ever surprise me again. At least that's what I imagined. Addressing her retreating back, I said tartly, "It's all right, thank you, and how are you, my dear wife?" I've already learned a little how to sit on the couch, staring into space and not thinking about anything. I was doing this when, shortly after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Maria came downstairs in a terry cloth robe with her hair wrapped in a towel. She sat down on the opposite end of the sofa and, turning to me, began brushing her long, damp hair. There was my wife, who had just made love to another man, sitting there and methodically combing her wet hair, as she had done 1,000 times or more in my presence. Visually, nothing has changed. It was a familiar, even intimate picture that screamed normality. However, under the comfortable and familiar exterior, the camouflage layer, everything was different. Maria, whom I married, loved, impregnated, comforted, cared for during her illness, and swore love, life, and fidelity, has disappeared. As if reading my mind, Maria said in a normal voice that I hadn't heard in weeks, if not months, "So Dave, I'm here, the same woman who left here on Friday night. I feel better than I have at any time in recent months." She winced as she touched the tangled hair, and then carefully untangled it. "Can we act like adults, or are you still throwing a pity party?" She just needed to turn the knife. I got up from the couch and headed upstairs. Easily returning to bitch mode, Maria hissed, "Where the hell are you going? We need to talk, damn it." "Maria, we haven't talked. You and that idiot Flanagan dictated the terms of unconditional surrender. I wasn't okay with this shit on Friday. I'm not okay with this now, and I won't be okay with this tomorrow." She jumped to her feet and screamed up the stairs. "I asked you where the hell you were going." I looked down at her intently. "Where I'm going is no longer your concern, dear wife. For the record, I'm moving my stuff to the guest room. Damn it, that's who you are, Dave Brown. You're my fucking husband, and you don't dare disrespect me in my own house." This is a great irony, Maria. You know, if you didn't have double standards, you wouldn't have standards at all, I shouted over her. When I was moving my things into the empty guest room, Maria came up to me and asked in an almost polite tone, "Did you cook anything for lunch? What makes you think I've had an appetite since Friday night?" She turned away from me. "Didn't Muzzle feed you today?" I growled. An evil smile appeared on her face. "No, he didn't do it. He was too busy showing me how a real man makes love before sending me home to my sweet little hubby," she said with a smirk. "So there's no food here, is there?" "No, dear. I've only been cooking for one since you left on Friday." Suppressing the urge to strangle this fool, I added, "Do you want to eat? There's rat poison in the basement, a drain under the sink, and I'm sure there's some cow dung behind the garage." "Fuck you, Dave, you childish bastard," she said before she left. "Ladies and gentlemen, Love has left the building," I yelled at her. We stayed away from each other for the rest of the day. I left my office only to have a quick sandwich and grab a change of clothes from the spare bedroom. The futon finally tired me out, and on Sunday evening I slept better and woke up early. I had a lot of work to keep me busy until Maria went to her office. I was even more amazed that my wife was so cowardly that she brewed coffee only for herself. Well, I reasoned, if you openly cheat on your husband, you're probably using him because of the coffee etiquette that we've been following for over 20 years. Then it got even worse, much worse. It was almost 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon when I heard a loud knock on the front door. It could not be confused with anything other than a police knock. "The Prater County Sheriff's Department. Open up," confirmed my suspicions. I remembered Robert's words on Friday night, and through the glass storm door I saw the papers in the deputy's clipboard rustling in the cold wind of late January. When I opened the door, I didn't have time to speak. "David Wayne Brown?" the deputy asked. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Please go outside and put your hands behind your back. I have a warrant for your arrest for domestic violence," he said. The second deputy handcuffed me when the first deputy explained the charges. "The complainant, Maria Elena Sandoval Brown, claims that you assaulted her at this residence last Friday, and Brent Elton Flanagan witnessed it. They read Miranda to me, and when the second deputy was locking my house, I asked them, 'So if your wife's boss came to your house, kissed your wife in front of you, and then told you that they were going to make love all weekend, what would you two fine, honest gentlemen do?' Both officers looked away, clearly confused. Yes, gentlemen, you better hope that Brent Flanagan never loves your wife, because between him and his corrupt daddy, they're using both of you. When they locked me in the patrol car, the second mate said, "Look, dude, we know this is a deal. We don't like it any more than you do." The first one added, "Me? I'm afraid I would have killed them both. I'm sorry that people like that don't deserve to live, but as you said, Flanagan has good connections in the courthouse, and we just work with sluts like you. It's not personal or anything like that." I was charged at 9 the next morning, and my wife and Flanagan were standing there. To her credit, this fool didn't even look at me or at her brother Robert, who represented me. When the judge asked me how I would respond to the charges, I replied decisively, "Innocent," which made Flanagan smile. Then the other shoe fell off. They handed me a temporary restraining order. A hearing to review the injunction will be held in 10 days next Friday. On Wednesday morning, I was given 45 minutes to pick up all the things I would need to live elsewhere. Since I work from home, this would mean trying to move the specialized plotter printer that I use, along with my high-end PC and all the appropriate printers and equipment needed to do my job. I would also need to transfer my work phone, and from that moment on, I had nowhere to live. Beatrice called several friends and family members, one of whom had access to the truck. During the move, a cold, windswept, icy rain began. There was no way I could get the expensive equipment out of my house. We wrapped up the computer and monitors and loaded them up, but the printers and filing cabinets were stuck between the 45-minute time limit and the terrible weather. We asked the deputy to give us more time, and he went to talk to my wife, who was sitting in her car where the long driveway intersects with the county road. He shook his head negatively, which forced us to leave. Robert came down and tried to explain the situation to Maria, but she said, "No, I want him to leave. He scares me." She couldn't look her brother in the eye. Not having time to return the equipment to my home office, we had to leave the plotter printer, other printers, and filing cabinets that held all my business records in the short hallway between the basement door and the entrance to my office. I spent the next 3 days trying to put things in order in this chaos that my life had become. Robert once again had to drop my case because the applicant was his sister. Robert pushed me to one of his partners, Acton Forsyth, a criminal defense lawyer in his late 30s who, in his youth, was an exact copy of the Australian actor Paul Hogan. Our strategy was simple. I will not accept a plea bargain in connection with domestic violence and will ask the jury to acquit me. I will testify about the mitigating circumstances and how I felt at that moment. Any reasonable jury will understand this for what it was, especially when Flanagan and Maria testified, and the facts related to my domestic violence became known. The most significant complication, of course, was the restraining order, which we would have had the opportunity to cancel, hopefully before the trial, but certainly after the acquittal. Texas juries are very powerful and regularly nullify the law when it becomes clear that common sense dictates justice, and not blind obedience to the law as it is written or interpreted. As I suspected, Maria recorded all the theatrical actions where she told me to step back and put my hand down. The whole situation was unstable, but first we had to lift the restraining order, and Forsyth immediately started working on the upcoming hearing. He also asked the judge who made the decision to give me the rest of the tools necessary to do my job. Although I was full of hope, I was definitely not patient, and my anger was eating me alive. Sandra insisted that I move into a small apartment attached to their garage, and to be honest, it was quite cozy and well-suited for working and living in a small space. I switched my office phone to a new phone line, but it took 3 days. I spent a lot of time on my mobile phone making proactive calls to my clients. That weekend, I was still in limbo and was able to work a little in my new rather cozy place. By Sunday afternoon, it was clear that excitement, lack of food and sleep, and constant stress had suppressed my immune system. As January drew to a close, I fell ill with one of the worst winter colds I've ever had. I started taking zinc and vitamin C in an attempt to minimize the effects of the disease. Forsyth called me on Monday evening. He said the judge instructed a deputy sheriff to take me home on Tuesday morning to determine what else I needed to pick up to do my job and live away from home. I could pick up what I could carry, and Forsyth arranged with a professional shipping company to pick up my office equipment. All I had to do was mark these things with pre-printed labels. The first thing I noticed was the appointment of Oliver Brown's assistant, not a relative, to accompany me. He had just returned from a serious work-related car accident and was undergoing physical therapy and rehabilitation. His job of accompanying me was something of an easy assignment. When Deputy Brown and I arrived at my house, Maria was there, and she tried very hard to make us uncomfortable. She informed the deputy that she now works mostly at home, but had to agree with the court order. A few minutes later, Maria drove away and parked at the end of the driveway next to the county road, thereby clearing the way for me to my own house legally. I could see that the deputy was clearly in pain, and I tried to sympathize with him and apologize for having to pull him out in this terrible weather in early February. When we entered my house, he did not follow me as he was supposed to. Instead, the deputy sat down in one of the comfortable chairs in the living room while I made my rounds, gathering more clothes and getting ready to mark the necessary equipment. To say that I was shocked would be a lie, because looking around, it became clear that Maria and Flanagan were making love in my house. The signs were everywhere. I found 3 pairs of Maria's lace panties I'd never seen, clearly rolled down her slender legs, and tossed aside when she and Flanagan apparently christened the kitchen table, dining table, and sofa. In all the years of our life together, she had never so casually tossed her discarded underwear aside. The knife turned and plunged much deeper. As I was sorting and packing the clothes, I saw clear evidence that Flanagan stayed in my house, slept in my bed, and used everything he wanted, including my wife. I took some photos of the evidence. They included photos of his clothes in my closet, his toiletries on my bathroom vanity, and even some of his medicines on the bedside table, including Viagra. Hastily grabbing my clothes and a few personal items, I packed them into a large duffel bag, which I left with the deputy sheriff. Then I checked my office equipment and found that all the items were missing. I notified the deputy, who started asking 20 questions. It was as if I didn't remember exactly where I'd left my property. I showed him the photos taken on the day we ran out of time, which show where we left the equipment. Then I showed Deputy Brown an empty seat. All the synapses finally closed in his brain and closed the circuit, and the deputy said, "They can't do this." Obviously, Deputy Brown is a future detective, I thought to myself. After checking the entire ground floor, I decided to check the basement, and my first clue was a huge fresh pothole on one of the wooden steps of the basement. And indeed, at the foot of the stairs I saw a completely destroyed printer plotter. Someone threw it down along with other printers and a printer stand. I found both filing cabinets smashed after their unceremonious fall down the stairs. One of them was almost lying on the bottom steps. The second filing cabinet had come off the first one and lay almost opposite the water heater, the one that I turned off the weekend before last. I went back upstairs, and when I told Deputy Brown, he quickly surveyed the destruction and retired to the kitchen table to write his incident report. Back in the basement, I took a closer look at the water heater and found that the damaged rusty pipe connection had been torn off. Obviously, it was the impact of the second filing cabinet, which severed the weakened connection. I noticed that the broken parts were still touching, and the gap was not noticeable in the dim light. However, the ball valve was still in the closed position, just as it was when I turned it off. For the first time in my life, I did something with malicious intent. Call me crazy or desperate, but I saw an opportunity and took it. The smirks, the condescension, the blatant disrespect, the crappy restraining order, the threats, the images of them making love, and the reality of Maria shoving my face into it. They pushed me to the line. I'm not shirking responsibility, but it's also not like I woke up that morning and decided to do something evil. Anyway, I'm living with the consequences now, and it can't be fixed. Throwing the sleeve of my jacket over my arm, I pushed the handle of the ball valve a little more than halfway to the wall of the second filing cabinet, which hit it. Immediately, I smelled the smell of natural gas. Wasting no time, I stepped aside and took flash photos of destroyed printers and broken filing cabinets. In the 2 images, you can clearly see the valve in the semi-open position. You can see the broken connection in the background of one photo, which shows the pipes. From the stairs to the basement, I looked at the central heating located at the other end of the basement. I heard the roar of a fan and saw the faint glow of a natural gas flame through the sight glass as the device struggled with the February cold. Flammable natural gas was slowly seeping into the basement, and fate took control of everything when I entered the kitchen and closed the door behind me. To hide my nervousness, I showed quiet, righteous indignation at what my wife and her boyfriend had done to my valuable equipment. While he was scribbling, I looked at the closed basement door and thanked myself for all the weather stripping I had used to seal this drafty old door. If anyone had discovered a gas leak, I would have offered my severe cold as a defense against not feeling the smell. If I had been asked why I hadn't seen the gas valve half open, I could have said that I was too upset and distracted by the sight of my destroyed printers and smashed filing cabinets to notice it. The deputy saw my trembling hands and said sympathetically, "Everything will be fine. I'm sure the judge will hold them accountable for contempt of court, and they've violated a couple of laws. I'll include all this in my report, Mr. Brown. I'll have your back, sir." He smiled and pointed to his papers for emphasis. I nodded. "Yes, sir, Deputy Brown, and thank you. I appreciate it." As we drove away, Maria walked past us, returning to the house, and stared straight ahead. The deputy noticed this and said, "She's pretty cold, isn't she?" I just nodded and stared at the familiar countryside passing by. What the hell have I done? I thought as panic rose in me. I can't undo this without admitting that I knew about it. The trip back to the city was long and quiet. Later that day, Acton Forsyth called me and said, "I have good news. Judge Smith charged your wife and Flanagan with contempt of court and recommended that the district attorney charge them with criminal hooliganism and intentional destruction of private property worth more than $1,500. Recommended it? I chuckled. To be honest, I had the same reaction. It's no coincidence that Smith is involved in this case. He and Flanagan Sr. were legal partners before Sr. was appointed to the State Resource Planning Commission, and Smith ran for district judge, Acton said. They will declare something insignificant. Yes, about a minor crime and about paying compensation. To hell with politics. I exhaled in disappointment. I have 2 professionally printed works there, worth about $200 each. This also needs to be paid for. I will inform the court clerk about this first thing tomorrow, and keep the receipts. We spent a few minutes discussing Friday's hearing regarding the temporary restraining order. Forsyth told me that our chances of canceling it were not too great until my trial on domestic violence charges, which may not be for several months, was over. Back at my apartment, I couldn't relax or even breathe normally. I developed a chronic dry cough. No matter how much I suffered, I went to the main house, where Sandra gave me a brand new bottle of NyQuil PM. I always buy a couple of bottles at the beginning of winter, she told me. I was leaning back on the couch in the apartment when Robert knocked on my door. He brought me a kettle wrapped in a towel. It was a real hot punch, courtesy of Sandra, which I gratefully drank. Robert and I talked for a while, and I must have dozed off. I woke up to pee, and the digital clock showed 12:37. A loud knock woke me up, and despite the lingering effects of the punch and cold medicine, I got unsteadily to my feet. Robert was standing in the doorway again, and the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Something happened in my house, and it was terrible. The sudden panic of my actions threatened to knock the ground out from under my feet, and I stood up, staggering. "What?" I shouted, angry and scared at the same time. Yes, both emotions were real. I knew my ass was on the hook for what happened, and I hoped I hadn't left any clues or made any mistakes covering my tracks. Guilt and remorse will come later. For a moment he was stunned, and then I saw Sandra's tear-stained face over his shoulder. "There was an explosion in your house," he said hoarsely. I realized that emotions were holding back Robert's voice. "That's right. This is bad, man. Really bad." Sandra hugged him from behind. Dressed in my jeans from yesterday, I threw a warm shirt over my t-shirt. Trembling with fear and fever, it took me some effort to put on my socks and shoes. Sandra helped me put on my coat, and we hurried to Robert's car. My mind was replaying everything I knew and did in my head. When we were driving to my house, I asked obvious questions that I always got an answer to. We don't know. There was a good chance that it wasn't as bad as I feared. The $64,000 question was as follows. What did I expect when I decided to act? I was surprised that I didn't even think about the result. Did I snap in anger? Did I resist a corrupt, politicized situation that was illegally set against me? Did I even care at that moment? Sandra interpreted my agitated, stoic silence as concern for Maria. I was looking out the back window of Robert's BMW from the passenger side when she turned in her seat and looked at me sympathetically. Sandra grabbed my hand like the sweet sister-in-law and good friend she was. "We're here for you, Dave. This is what a family does." We turned off the main highway onto County Road 14, and against the background of the pre-dawn glow, I saw a curtain of smoke billowing over a distant tree line. My tears were sincere when we got closer. The deputy stopped us about a quarter of a mile from the house, but allowed us to continue when I introduced myself. I was shocked by how complete the devastation was. Almost the entire roof was smoldering at the garage, and the destroyed walls were shattered. The floors and interior walls were a tangled mass of planks and debris that filled the hole in the basement. Clothes, papers, photographs, pieces of furniture, bricks from the first floor, and boards were scattered everywhere. I took the piece of paper and saw that it was a mobile phone bill for last October. Sandra found a photo of Andy at a summer camp when she was about 10 years old. While there was a sudden fire in the explosion, very little was burned. The nearest volunteer fire brigade was there within minutes, shut down utilities, and extinguished small, incipient fires that were beginning to spread. They even found my safe, which was hidden in the inner wall in the master bedroom closet behind the shoe rack. They found him in the middle of the driveway near the garage. My life, my wife, and everything I possessed lay shattered in front of me. Incongruously, family memories floated around me in a refreshing breeze. Without warning, my knees buckled, and they helped me climb into the back of the ambulance, where they gave me oxygen and checked my vital signs. The emergency doctor warned me that with my fever, low blood oxygen levels, and wheezing in my lungs, I probably have pneumonia. It took me about 15 minutes to recover enough to get back to the grim task I was facing. Sandra and Robert hugged me as we watched in silence as firefighters found and covered the two bodies with yellow plastic sheets. A weak, cold winter sun peeked over the horizon, flooding the stage with brilliant yellow light. What did I feel? Grief, guilt, anger, fear, a loss, all of the above? It was impossible to determine because these feelings manifested themselves in such similar ways that I couldn't figure them out properly. Maybe this cruel event deprived me of sensitivity and broke the part of me that could sort emotions and deal with them. Perhaps some reptilian survival instinct took over to save what was left of me. I felt sick, dizzy, and welcomed the darkening oblivion that bent my knees and dragged me away from this terrible scene. The next thing I remember is lying in a hospital bed, breathing in the soothing wet coolness through an oxygen mask. My vital signs crawled across the monitor in accordance with the steady rhythm of my beating heart. Andy was sitting restlessly in an armchair and crying, and I wondered why she wasn't at school. And then it dawned on me. Her mother died, and so did her father. Where am I? What am I doing here? I must have gasped because Andy jumped up to me in an instant, hugged me, and started crying. "Oh, Daddy, please be okay. You're all we have, Daddy." Then I remembered my house blown to pieces, the debris scattered all over the gentle rise, which we jokingly called Brown Mountain. I mourned the loss of my marriage and the woman I loved with all my heart. I cried about the loss of my humanity, about the place and the things we called home, and about everything that the word once meant. Was I a murderer? Was it self-defense? Maria and Brent didn't give a damn about his wife or me. But was it literally unnecessary? So many strong, contradictory emotions filled me. When Andy and I were talking about the explosion and the events of the last weeks and months, she told me that Drew was organizing his mother's funeral. It bothered me that my 20-year-old son had taken on this grim task. Because of this, I felt more guilt and sadness than because of my actions that created this chaos. As if reading my mind, Andy added, "Grandma and Robert are helping him. Aunt Sandra, Aunt Tina, and Uncle Art have sent people to the house to pick up everything they can, especially the photos and your papers. There wasn't much fire, so basically everything was just scattered and buried. They don't let anyone into the ruins of the house because the fire chief, the sheriff's department, and some others are looking for a reason." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hands, which I noticed were the same as Maria's, and continued, "There must be 50 people helping out there, even in this cold. So many people love you, Daddy." Andy omitted her mother in this statement, even though we both knew that Maria was loved by many, perhaps more than me. "Baby," I said, "your mom was loved by a lot more people than me. She was like her grandmother in that." Andy nodded and choked back more tears, and then the dam burst. "Oh, Daddy, Dad, why she did it? What happened to Mom?" The pain that plagued my daughter was absolute. I cried with her, mourning my daughter, my wife, and my tortured soul. Why did I do what I did? How could I ever forgive myself, or live with it? Well, that's where I ended up. It was clear that I had two choices: confess my actions or live with them. At least it was manslaughter or murder one. Given that Flanagan Sr. insists on this, it is not known how they will seek punishment if I confess. This realization decided everything. Maybe I was in complete denial and felt justified for my actions, but that's how I saw things. First of all, I didn't start this shit. If my wife had a psychotic episode caused by hormones or psychological problems, Flanagan shouldn't have taken advantage of her. Moreover, being married and dating a married woman was wrong on all levels. On the one hand, the wrong thing was the sheer immorality of it. On the other hand, it was wrong that Flanagan was a judicial official who used his legal status and political connections to marginalize any opposition from his wife or me. He and his old man did not hesitate to put their finger on Lady Justice's scales, using money, power, and influence to control, manipulate, and destroy. I reasoned that all I had done was use my only means to correct this imbalance. Take my wife and I'll take him, Brent Flanagan. Lynching? Guerrilla warfare? I think it was, and like the partisans everywhere, it was the only battle I could fight or afford. Now I'm paying for it, and I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. Thinking about it, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Was I misled, and do I still do it? Maybe, but I carry a terrible guilt inside me, and I work every day to atone for it. A severe case of double pneumonia and severe sinusitis kept me in the hospital for another 4 days. Acton Forsyth discussed the obvious with me. They dropped the domestic violence charges because the complainant and the main witness were dead. The same goes for the injunction. Forsyth also discussed the upcoming hearing of the magistrate's case. Texas law requires an investigation by a justice of the peace in small counties, those without a medical examiner, where deaths of a suspicious, violent, or unspecified nature occur. The case was complicated, and it took time to gather all the facts and call witnesses to court. Thus, the date of the inquest was set 2 weeks after I left the hospital. A 6-person jury will evaluate the facts and testimony under the chairmanship of a justice of the peace. The district attorney assisted in the interrogation. The JP investigation is an investigative hearing, and my lawyer will not be present. He told me that old man Flanagan didn't like the jury's presence. He knew that if only JP had investigated, I could probably have been sent straight to the TGAC in Huntsville, using his political influence, money, and influence. Rumors have leaked about what Junior and Maria were doing in my marital bed at the family home. Every local politician has decided to put this politically tainted shit in the capable hands of 6 average Texans, whose judgment and common sense have been invoked thousands of times to make the right decision. Damn political expediency. Yes, even the meanest politician knows that you can't put shit together from scratch. The fact that 6 of my peers were facing me was the first case of justice I'd had since the night of the conversation. The irony, of course, is that I was guilty of what the old man wanted to accuse me of, but he didn't care if I was really guilty or not. He reasoned that I was in that basement that day, so I must be guilty. Heck, even the BATF from Dallas was there, taking swabs, checking the soil, and doing everything possible to find explosive remnants, but found nothing. In his report, Deputy Brown stated that I have photographs of the damage to my equipment, so it is not surprising that my images and his report, along with our testimony, were presented to the court. On the first day of the investigation, they called me to testify at 10:42 and finished with me only at 12:28. I stuck to my story. The rules and procedures of evidence are more informal than in criminal proceedings. A lawyer can only be present with a person accused of a crime related to the deaths under investigation. A lot of what happens during these investigations is a common sense view of what happened. I've heard it described as unofficially formal. The magistrate, with the help of the district attorney, questioned me as well as all the witnesses. No, I didn't smell natural gas because I had a terrible cold, which soon turned into pneumonia and sinusitis, which required hospitalization on the day of the explosion. My severe, lingering post-viral cough and the fact that I still looked sick after more than 2 weeks in the hospital probably strengthened my credibility. No, I didn't notice the partially open position of the gas valve because I was upset and focused on the destroyed tools that helped me earn a living. In addition, when there is only one light bulb on at the top of the stairs, it is always quite gloomy downstairs. The enlarged images of 4 of my 12 photographs, all taken with a flash, clearly showed the position of the valve and the damage to the filing cabinets. One of the photos showed the black paint from the second filing cabinet, which they threw down, transferred to the water heater. In the same photo, what fire investigators identified as a ruptured leaking joint showed that it was still in place and could easily have been overlooked. The district attorney issued a restraining order, which I addressed as objectively as possible. I confessed that I grabbed my wife's wrist right after she kissed Brent Finnegan in our house. JP allowed me to describe my feelings and the despair I felt. Stress, tension, My poor health and guilt pushed me to the edge when I explained how I felt watching my wife walk out the door and drive away with another man. I burst into sincere tears. This seemed to hold back the questioning a bit. I never mentioned the strange things that Maria said that evening during the conversation that she recorded. During my preliminary investigation with Forsyth, we discussed the dubious nature of the recording. He pointed out that the recording was not mentioned in support of the injunction. However, Judge Smith most likely listened to him, but could not admit that he had done so. Therefore, Forsyth reasoned, it was better for me not to mention it, because officially it did not exist, and I should not have brought it to life. When asked about the photos I took of Brent's belongings in my house, which I had to examine during my testimony, I admitted that I had taken them as evidence in my planned divorce, where I planned to cite adultery as the basis. Then I innocently asked about the missing Viagra photos on the nightstand. Suddenly, the distressed magistrate invited the district attorney to his office for a discussion. The solution was that I had to pull these photos out of the cloud, and the jury handed over my phone. It was obvious to the judge and the jury what the district attorney had done. The most aggressive interrogation concerned my work on the water heater in the basement. I described what I found that Saturday, which corresponded to the conclusions of the fire investigator obtained from the wreckage of the explosion. I also told the investigation that I had blocked the supply valve. "Have you made any attempts to repair the damage, Mr. Brown?" the district attorney asked. "No, I didn't do it because I didn't have any details or experience, so I made the water heater safe by turning off the gas supply. I was going to call the plumber next week," I answered honestly. "Did you think to seal the valve with tape or wire to prevent what happened?" "No, sir. I am the only one who has ever gone down to the basement, and the valve was not in danger of being accidentally turned on. I've shut off gas or propane lines before, and I've never had this problem," I replied. "Looking back, don't you think it would have been better to keep him safe? It was a classic, I realized." "No, sir. Not at all. I mean, the last thing I could imagine is that someone would throw my 2 heavy filing cabinets down the stairs to the basement, and the second cabinet would land on the first one and bounce 3 feet into the gas supply line." "Sir." The 2 jurors smiled. Undeterred, the district attorney moved on. "And you didn't think to call a plumber to eliminate this dangerous condition?" I forced myself to calm down. "No, sir. I was in jail on Monday evening and haven't been home since Tuesday." "When you had to leave your home, don't you think that Mrs. Brown should have known about this problem?" I looked at the justice of the peace and said, "I had a temporary restraining order. As far as I understand, communicating with my wife in any way would violate this." "Am I right, sir?" After a brief inspection of the TRO, JP replied, "That's right, Mr. Brown. Contacting your wife or Mr. Flanagan, even by text or email, would be a violation of this order." I turned to the district attorney and said, "To be honest, sir, it slipped my mind because my life exploded, starting with the arrest. But there was no danger of this valve being accidentally turned on, sir, except in an extreme case. Besides, if I had thought about it and contacted Maria in her agitated state, she would have arrested me for violating the restraining order." This went on for most of this long session. It wasn't a test, but it definitely felt like it. I later found out that Robert testified about my condition on the night of Maria and Brent's date, and about my actions in the days leading up to the explosion. Sandra also testified. They even called Beatrice Sandoval to discuss her attempts to get Maria to release me from the temporary restraining order, or not to try to make it permanent. The deputy who took me to my residence that last time, Oliver Brown, described the intense pain he was in and how he couldn't go down the stairs to the basement or go up to the second floor with me. He testified that he had never approached the basement door closer than 8 feet away and did not smell natural gas. When Tanya Barrett Flanagan testified, she attacked the crooks with both barrels. Despite the fact that the district attorney was trying to keep her testimony relevant, she described threats from her husband if she insisted on a divorce, which exactly echoed my testimony. Mrs. Barrett Flanagan confirmed that her husband had left their family home for the weekend for the cheating couple's date. In addition, Brent's widow confirmed that he left their house when the injunction forced me to return to my temporary residence. She said that her husband openly admitted that he was moving in with Maria to continue his affair with her. Although deleted from the official record of the investigation, Mrs. Barrett Flanagan uttered an unforgettable phrase. I hope that bastard was up to his ears in his cheating girlfriend when their love nest exploded. A well-known otolaryngologist from Fort Worth testified about the loss of sense of smell during severe colds and sinusitis. In fact, he said that different people reacted differently. His testimony essentially stated that there was no way to prove that I could or could not smell a gas leak. There were many unsolvable questions and indefinable facts in this investigation. The main reason was that the two main witnesses were dead. In addition, the explosion completely destroyed the place of death, along with most of the concrete physical evidence of what happened. Based on the best available evidence, the jury determined during the magistrate's investigation. The explosion occurred at 5:37 a.m. on February 3rd in a semi-rural area of Prater County, Texas. The explosion was caused by the ignition of a mixture of natural gas and air in a residential basement, while the likely source of ignition was a natural gas central heating unit located in the same room. The source of the natural gas was a broken supply line powered by a partially open built-in ball valve, which the homeowner had previously turned off. The actual events or actions that caused the leak were undetermined due to the subsequent explosion and flash of fire, which led to the almost complete destruction of the structure and its contents. Crucial to understanding when the leak started depended on knowing when the filing cabinet or other item had pressed this valve to partially open. No one knew exactly when the closet was thrown into the basement, because two people who knew were dead. Brent's cell phone showed that he left our house at 9:37 a.m. that morning to testify in court at 11:10 a.m., and Deputy Brown and I arrived at 10:05 a.m. So if the filing cabinets were thrown down the stairs to the basement sometime in the morning, causing a leak and a partially open valve, the smell of natural gas may have been quite weak, especially with my weakened olfactory senses, or these items could have lain in the basement for several days, and the severed connection did not pose any problems. This would mean that the valve was turned on later, by an unknown person or persons or in some unintended way. There was simply no evidence to support any conclusion. Due to its speculative nature, the final investigation report did not contain this information. The final investigation report concluded, according to the fire investigator's report, the source of ignition of the fuel-air mixture in the basement was a central heating unit located about 26 feet from the water heater. Checking the faulty water heater supply line showed both an installation error and corrosion caused by an unknown water leak. Black paint from filing cabinet number 2, filing cabinet number 1 was gray, was applied both to the body of the water heater and to the lower section of the supply line. The impact of the filing cabinet probably caused the loose connection to separate and most likely partially opened the ball valve. The jury accepts the coroner's findings on the deaths of Brent Elton Flanagan, WM 36, and Maria Elena Sandoval Brown, HF 44. The autopsy revealed that they died from a combination of standard penetrating and blunt trauma, as well as from lung rupture and the force of overpressure acting on the surface of their bodies. The force of the explosion threw both of them out of the residence, and they remained on the field among the debris. His body was 63 feet northwest of the northwest corner of the house, and hers was 84 feet northwest of the same corner. Both were wearing remnants of sleep-appropriate clothing, with the exception of the deceased woman, who was still wearing what the jury confirms is an adjustable pelvic strap that allows certain specialized devices to be attached for marital assistance. Based on this last sentence, Tony Barrett Flanagan's final statement, even deleted from official testimony, turned out to be prophetic, although somewhat inaccurate in detail. And no, the medical examiner's autopsy report did not confirm the discovery of a specialized family care device inside the personality of Brent Flanagan Jr. decency, as well as his well-connected background, precluded such an inconsequential mention. The official conclusion read, "The jury considers this explosion to be an accident, the exact cause of which cannot be determined due to the lack of convincing evidence. The bodies of the victims have now been released for final posthumous burial. That's all." In a nutshell, no one knows exactly what happened, what exactly caused the leak or the gas valve to turn on, because there is no evidence. Even the circumstantial evidence is contradictory. So in the absence of my confession, the case is closed. Brent Flanagan Sr. was shocked by the jury's findings. The old man immediately announced a reward of $150,000 to find the culprits for this crime, although the official investigation did not find any evidence of a crime. He says he knows I did it, but even he understands that knowing something and proving it are completely different things. For the average cheated husband or wife, what I did probably seems like a simple matter, given the perfect opportunity to take revenge on the cheaters. The same people would call me weak or stupid out of guilt and remorse for my actions. I would tell these people that they have never been in my place. No matter how bad it is, when you are betrayed, insulted, threatened, and lied to, you can take comfort in knowing that you are definitely a good person. You are the offended one, the one who has moral principles. However, when you cross this unbreakable line and take a life or lives, you become on the other side, from which there is no return. It's true that when you start looking for revenge, dig 2 graves or 3 in my case. Unfortunately, this discovery happened only in hindsight. Speaking from a distance about another person's situation would seem clear, but absolutely abstract. However, as the rapper once succinctly stated, everyone wants to be a gangster until they have to do gangster shit. Even an idiot with a low IQ understands this, because when you consciously decide to start something that cannot be stopped, everything changes forever. It's a bit like choosing to be a traitor, which brings us back to the full circle. The feeling of guilt has weakened somewhat because the human mind has a way of self-preservation. I regret my actions and constantly try to atone for them. By trying, I have become a better, caring, generous, and loving person in all aspects of my life. Now I have grandchildren to take care of, new and loving relationships to develop, and I am closer than ever to my late wife's family. I am also closer to my parents and relatives after this turning point in my life. In our memories, Maria is a caring mother and a loving woman, whom I fell in love with and with whom I lived all these good years. After her death, she is rehabilitated in our hearts and minds, and I really forgave her. My sincere forgiveness also extends to Brent Flanagan Sr. and Jr. The only one I'm still trying to forgive is David Wayne Brown. I'm always working on it. This struggle makes me humble, repent, and try my best every single day.